Hi guys, welcome to a quick video lecture to help you with your assignment for today with closed captioning. Ooh. So, as you know from yesterday's or last class's assigned textbook reading, this week we are looking at the New Deal, which is the name for this collection of government programs started by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt to address all of the issues that America was facing during the Great Depression. Historians have often talked about the New Deal programs as addressing what are called the three R's: relief, recovery, and reform. Almost all New Deal programs are designed in such a way to address at least one of those three areas. So a little preview of your assignment. After watching this video and reviewing some of your information from the textbook about these New Deal programs, you're going to choose three that you think best addressed the problems of the Great Depression. Why were these the three maybe most significant programs to help pull the United States out of this economic downturn? Second thing you're going to do is think about our current moment. The country is going through a crisis right now, as you well know. It's economic, it's financial, it's social, it's medical. There are a lot of problems associated with the coronavirus. So we want you guys to think about designing a New Deal style program, a program of government intervention that might address some of the problems that we are facing today. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about what are some of the problems of the Great Depression. There are many, but here are a couple big ones. One of the first ones is that people are unemployed. We know from the documents that you looked at last week that many Americans were already kind of in poorly paying, unstable jobs even before the Depression began. And when the Depression really takes off, millions of Americans are losing their jobs. That also relates to the second issue here, which is that the country's economy is in terrible shape. When people lose their jobs and can't go out and buy things, and you have an oversupply of products, the prices tend to fall, which sounds like a good thing, but it actually creates this terrible spiral of deflation. Because if a company can't get people to buy, even when they're cutting their prices, they have to cut prices, they have to cut their costs in other areas, which means laying off more workers. Those are then more people going out into the economy who have no income, who cannot buy things, and you get kind of sucked into this downward spiral. One of the other major concerns for Americans during the 1930s is that this could easily happen again. There are not the kind of safety nets in place that we have today that help people in times of depression. So there's no unemployment insurance, there's no Social Security. The government has not operated in that way in the past. And a lot of the businesses that have been operating really badly, like banks, are not being regulated at all by the federal government. So the first of those three R's is relief, right? If you just think about the word relief, it kind of sounds like, that's a relief, right? Something kind of being lifted off your shoulders, this weight kind of lifting off of you. And this is really has to do with helping Americans. So if a goal of a relief effort might be to address the unemployment crisis, the way the government is going to design a program to do that is to try to create jobs. In this case, where the government is going to hire people directly instead of waiting for businesses to be able to hire people. An example of a New Deal program that did that is the Civilian Conservation Corps, or the CCC, which employs millions of young men who go off and work in national forests and on infrastructure projects, building roads and bridges and stuff like that all over the country, and are paid in a way that they send their money back home to their families. So this gives people jobs, and it allows people to get some relief maybe from debt during this time. The next R is recovery, right? If you think about recovery as like fixing something or getting something back to the way it was before. Think about if you break like your arm and you have to go to physical therapy to try to get that arm working the way it was before. That's an example of recovery. So if a goal of recovery would be to try to help the country get out of this financial depression, the way that the government might design a program to do that is try to think of something that would stimulate the economy by stabilizing prices, by incentivizing industries to start making more. So getting companies to make more stuff for people to buy at a time when they're really shutting down production. or trying to incentivize people to go out and buy big expensive things that employ a lot of people, like houses. So an example of this type of program would be something like the Federal Housing Administration, which makes it possible for Americans to get affordable home loans so that they can go out and buy homes, which, as we know, if you're building a new home, employs a lot of people, right, in the construction of the home itself, but as well as all the other materials that go into building it. So finally, the last area, the last R, is reform, right? If you think about reform as fixing something, right? Dealing with a problem. We've talked about reform movements in American history before. If you think about temperance or prohibition, those are reform movements that are trying to fix the problems associated with alcohol. So in this case, a goal of a reform movement during the Great Depression might be to stop a depression like this from happening again. The government might then decide to create programs that allowed for oversights and fail-safes, ways for the government to monitor what's going on in certain industries, like the stock market or the banking industry, and regulate those, right? Impose some rules that will prevent people from maybe behaving badly or carelessly in ways that end up having these really bad negative effects for lots and lots of Americans. So the idea here is to reform create reform programs that are going to address the problems that caused the Great Depression in the first place. An example of this is the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is still around today, and this is the major government body that oversees the stock market and sets rules about speculation, about margin buying, about insider trading, all of the kind of shady practices that contributed to the stock market being so volatile in 1929 when it had that major crash. These are ways to prevent that type of crash from happening again in the future. So with all of that in mind, you are now ready to complete today's assignment. Again, go back and look at 3 New Deal programs that you think best address the problems of the Great Depression. Be prepared to talk about which they are addressing, and then create a New Deal style program of your own to try to help us deal with our current crisis of the coronavirus. Good luck.